This is 11 honors, and we're looking at Victorian poets, Alfred Lord Tennyson, and we're going to look at the Charge of Light Brigade. There is a test tomorrow, quiz on the last part, or not the last part, the next part of Red Badger Courage. Need to give you a little background on this. This is a real event. I don't know if I have the dates with me. I should have prepared this. Thought I knew them. Maybe I can give you the date here. Oh yeah, I do have the dates here. Okay, good. So this real event took place, interesting, October 25th, 1854, in an interesting part of the world. This is interesting. Very great timing. This took place during something called the Crimean War. You know where Crimea is? C-R-I-M-E-A is Crimea. Put an N on it, and it's the Crimean War.
Okay.
Anybody know where it is? Well, it's actually, I don't know if it's part of the Ukraine or at that time, or I don't know if it's ever been part of the Ukraine, but it literally is south of Ukraine. All right, and Ukraine's in the news today. And 8 years ago, the Russians, what's his name, Putin, went into Ukraine, Crimea and basically took it over. So here, 8 years later or so, he's going back and taking the rest of Ukraine. But Crimea is, I wish I had a map. Wish we had maps in here. Do you know where the Black Sea is? I think it's sometimes called the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. You know, it separates like Asia on the right, Turkey, and basically Europe on the left, I mean Asia on the east and Europe on the west. Anyway, in 1854, the Russians, that's also interesting. The Russians were fighting over Crimea with the British. And Crimea is important because there's a port there that if you can control Crimea, you can control the Black Sea. And so it's always been a very strategic part of that part of the world. Well, anyway, on October 25th, 1854, I don't know how to put this, an order, but it was an incorrect order. Don't ask me how that could be, but a unit of British light cavalry. If they're cavalry, what are they? All right, light cavalry means their weapons are, you know, maybe you know what a carbine is? Carbine. It's a short rifle, and it was designed for cavalrymen, you know, because cavalrymen can't carry a long rifle or load it, so carbines, I think, were created for cavalrymen. I don't know if they had those here, but this brigade of light cavalry were ordered to charge into an artillery position of the Russians, and it was an incorrect order. They followed through it because it was an order nonetheless. Don't ask me how it was an incorrect order was created, but I don't know the answer to that. But they charged into this artillery position, and 3/4 of them were wounded, killed, or taken prisoner. So I think there are 600. So 3/4 of them is about 450. So 600 went on the charge, 150 came back. Maybe some wounded came back, but 150 that were not wounded, killed, or taken prisoner. So it was such a big story that Tennyson wrote this poem about it called The Charge of the Light Brigade. You should also note that there are 6 stanzas, and each of the stanzas kind of represents part of the plot triangle. You know, what if you think of the plot? What are the sections of the plot? Like every plot typically has these 5 parts to it. You know where they are?
Climax.
Well, that would be right in the middle.
Right.
And literally, it doesn't have to be in the middle of the story. It could be later in the story, but it's in the middle of the plot triangle. So what else? What does a plot have to have?
Meeting all the characters in the setting, and then the slow, like,
good. So you have the introduction or exposition, the introduction to the characters in conflict. You have the rising action, which is the events that take place up to the climax, which is the peak of the story, turning point of the story. And then you have the falling action and conclusion. Well, that's 5. This has 6 stanzas. So those 5 things are kind of stretched over 6 stanzas. So I'm going to start, but would you help me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll finish. I'll start and finish. We'll go to Aurora and then Sierra, and then do you feel like doing this? Okay, and then you'll do the 5th one, I'll do the 6th one. Here we go. Famous poem, by the way. Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600.
Forward the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had plundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600.
You can go see her.
Okay. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600.
Over savored stairs, flashed as they turned in the air, savored the glorious air, charging an army, while all the world wondered, punched in the battery smoke, right through the wonder broke.
Cossack.
And Russian reeled from saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then he rode back, but not the 600.
Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed out with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They thought they that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, as all that was left of them, left of 600.
When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the Light Brigade. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade. Noble 600. So this appeared in a newspaper shortly after this event. The British actually won the war, even though they lost this particular battle. So let's look at the question. All right, so we'll do these together, and then you can do the other one by yourselves. What does the first stanza tell us about the setting, the conflict, the characters? This is what Aurora was saying. This is the introduction. How far must the brigade charge? Explain the poem's allusion to the Valley of Death. What does the allusion add to the poem? So in one stanza, there's a lot there. But what do you learn about the setting, conflict, and characters?
It's a valley.
Yeah, go ahead, Aurora.
They're slowly walking to, I guess, the line where they're gonna start fighting Russia.
So they are riding toward that point. The poem, the charge has already begun, and they're riding, and there is a valley. Well, it says Valley of Death.
It's valley.
There may be a literal valley there, there may not, but what does the Valley of Death remind you of? It's an allusion to something. Yeah, so what is the allusion? What biblical verse is it alluding to? Anybody remember? Probably the most famous passage in the entire Bible, at least Old Testament. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures, He leadeth me beside still waters. He restores my soul, leading me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the what? Valley of the shadow of death. So let's skip to that. Why is that mentioned? There may literally be a valley here, or they may not. But why is it appropriate?
Because
What?
they're gonna die. Or some of them are gonna die.
Right, it's a good way to describe this. Do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death? Okay. Why does the fact that it's a biblical allusion, what does that add to the poem? Like, you probably don't care about the Crimean War in the 1850s, although, as I said, there's a war going on right now in the same place, not Crimea, but right above it, north of it, in Ukraine. But why does that maybe make you appreciate the poem more when they mention the valley of the shadow of death? Why might that connect with the reader, this story, more? I just said it's the most famous verse, maybe passage in all the Old Testament. So everybody knows it. If you've ever been in trouble, you may have said it. So now all of a sudden, you are connecting with the poem, even though you're not in Crimea in 1854. He's made it personal a little bit. So the setting, the characters, who are the characters?
600.
600 what?
Troops? Or the 600 Commission? Or British?
They are British and they're cavalrymen. And actually, cavalrymen are called troopers. Did you know there's still a cavalry in the U.S. Army?
Still?
Yeah. They call it that. Now, it's not literally using horses anymore. Because what do they use?
Tanks.
It's mechanized. It's the mechanized part of the Army. It's the
I'm actually going to get the Army.
I think they often call those guys cavalry. And I don't know if that's still, as of today, what they call them, but they have in the past. All right, so how far do they have to go? How far do they have to go?
Half a league.
Yeah, have any idea how much a league is? I'm not even sure. I always look it up, and it ranges from 1.5 miles something to like 4 miles. So if you just take the smallest side of that, or let's take the 3 miles or 4 miles. If you just take how far, it's not a league, it's half a league. So you're talking about at least a mile or 1.5 miles, which is the same distance Pickett's charge covered. So my guess is probably longer than that, because horses would make, that's a pretty short distance for a horse. So maybe it's 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles, something like that. But still, pretty long distance. All right, number 2. What is the emotional conflict introduced in the second stanza? So not only they have to charge into, and it doesn't say this, but it is an artillery position. So you're talking about horses against cannon. How close do you have to be to kill somebody with a cannon? You could be 1 mile or more away and still kill people with cannon, even in the 1850s. And so that adds certainly to the danger of their attack. How close does the cavalry have to get before they can do any damage?
Like a few feet.
Yeah, well, they've got sabers. You have to literally be face to face with somebody. And if they have carbines, they could shoot from their horse. I don't know if they do enough. But what other emotional element is added in the second stanza? What does it say? I mean, not only do you have to face the distance and the cannon, but what else is on the back of their mind?
They have to do what they're told, and they can't
Because?
ask why, because that's just their duty, and that's what
Good.
they're supposed to do.
And it uses the word blundered. Would you do something you knew was a mistake? How far would you go with that? Is there anybody in your life who could tell you to do something, and you knew for a fact that it was a mistake to do it? Is there anybody in your life you would do it anyway? Because they told you to do it, just because you respected that person, even though you know it's going to fail. Do you know anybody in your life you would do that? Maybe your parents, maybe somebody else, but you respect them that much. Well, you mentioned, wasn't it, you mentioned, what is the code of the soldier? It says so right there. You don't reason why, you just do and what? What does it say, do and what?
Do and die.
It doesn't say do or die, it says do and die. So yes, that adds to the emotional. And so we answered that. We answered that's the code of soul. You don't question an order, you do it. Now, did you know, speaking of Russia, did you know that apparently there are soldiers, the rumor is, or the reports are, that some Russian soldiers are basically sabotaging their own equipment in order not to have to fight against basically other Russians. These people are very much Russian, even though they may be somewhat different, you know, ethnic background or so, but there are lots of Russians in Ukraine. That's not the soldier's way. The soldier's way is to do what you're told, but some of these soldiers are not. What about the soldiers at the concentration camps of Hitler? That was actually their excuse when they were tried after the war. They said, "Well, we're just taking orders and following orders." What do you think of that argument?
They weren't actually forced. I mean, they are, but like, it's not like they have to do it. If that makes sense.
Well, what about this idea? Theirs is not to make reply, theirs not the reason why, it's theirs but to do and die. What if they took that attitude? Is that an excuse for cremating Jews? And
I think there's like a difference between going to war for your country and like just torturing people for like innocent people for no reason.
that is a very wise point. That is a difference. That's not what they signed up for. They didn't sign up to kill women and children, innocent women and children. They came up to fight wars. So I think that is a really good. So that defense didn't work at Nuremberg when they had the trial for these people. They couldn't. Every one of them said that because Hitler was dead. Some of the other guys were dead. So he made me do it. You know, it didn't work. They hanged him anyway.
I feel like deep down you have to believe what you're doing in order to just obey without, like just obey blindly, I guess. You have to deep down believe that what you're obeying blindly is right.
So when you get to a point of killing innocent women and children, that's not what you signed up for. You can't really believe, you can't really do it if you don't believe that's the right thing. And soldiers do almost anything. That's what this creed is. You do and die, you don't make reply. But when he says, shoot these innocent people, that's when you're drawing the line, right? I mean, I think we should all draw the line at that point. All right, number 3. Delaney, would you read it?
What further details about their changes does the third stanza introduce? How do the phrases jaws of hell and mouth of hell intensify the conflict of the poem?
Yeah, and it's their charge. It's the charge of the Light Brigade. So what about it? It's really part 3. Cannon to the right, cannon to the left, cannon in front, volleyed and thundered. They rode into the jaws of death, mouth of hell. So what details do we pick up here?
The gun is really destructive and bloody, and it's not pretty in any sense, and it's something that no one wants to go through.
Yes, and when it says jaws of death, mouth of hell, what does that image, that metaphor add? What does it, when it says jaws of death, mouth of hell, what does that add to it? What is it a metaphor for? It's the jaws of death.
That when they die, it's not gonna be good. Well, obviously.
Right, but
Will they like go to hell?
when you see that, when you think of that image, jaws of death, mouth of hell, what image comes to your mind? A shark, a bear. So we're talking about animals. So it kind of lends a bestial kind of picture here. Hello. Sure, sure. Hope you feel better as you go.
Did you go to the brain doctor?
Not yet, no. Maybe then I'll figure out what's wrong with me.
Wait, what's wrong?
I don't know, I'm mentally ill.
About that.
Hope you feel better. All right, so anyway, it sort of makes you think being chewed up by an animal. That makes it a little worse. And you mentioned hell, right? Didn't you mention hell?
Mm-hmm.
That adds a different, most people when they die, I don't know what they're thinking. But that certainly adds injury to injury, more than insult to injury. You're dying, that's bad enough, but now you're gonna die and go to hell. In the Civil War, a lot of the soldiers would say to each other, "See ya in hell." And I guess that was just sort of a macho thing to say, they would see, all right, we'll see you in hell. But anyway, look at 4. How does stanza 4 climax, or the turning point of the story? How far does the attack go? What happens next? So it says, flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600. So what is being described there?
When the two armies meet.
So literally, it is the turning point, because this was where they were going. This was their goal all along, is to reach this point, and they did. And then they turned around, literally, and went back. What happens when they get there? What do they do when they get there?
Charge the line.
And they break the line. And what do they do when they break the line? They saber the gunners. So what's a saber?
Staff or sword.
Yeah, it's a short sword, one a cavalryman would carry. So they're sabering the gunners. But how do we know they didn't win?
Because it talked about how a lot of people died, and it said that they rode back, but not the 600.
So the fact that they rode back, why is that an indication they didn't win? What would have happened if they had won?
They would have kept going.
They would have stayed there. That's how you determine who wins something. Who leaves, who runs away, who stays. That's kind of the way you determine who wins a battle. Well, they went back, they retreated. So that would indicate they didn't win. How have they changed? Like, what statement is made here that shows you that they have changed? So they rode back, but not what?
600.
So what does that mean? That there were 450, now it doesn't say that, but we know that's what happened. 450 of them didn't make it. That's a lot of people. I think in one attack, 400 people, I mean, that's the entire rhetoric and dialectic school. That we have about 400 people. That would be that many people got shot up, wounded, or dead in that attack, which lasted, it didn't last an hour, it lasted minutes. That's a lot of people. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention this. Turn back just a minute. In question, in number 3, it says, cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them. What does that tell you about the attack?
It's all written.
They're almost encircled. It's like this. What's the only part of them that's not being shot at? Okay, now look what they're doing. Let's look at number 5. Now they're retreating. What additional, in fact, worse trouble are they in now?
Cannon's behind them, so they can't turn around.
That's right. You ever been chased by somebody? Isn't it scary? Your brother, You're not talking about some bad person. You're talking about some relative, you know, like a brother or sister. But isn't it something scary about being chased? I think so. I think it, you know, as a kid, you know, just your brother's chasing you, it adds to the intensity. But now they're being shot from the back, so that makes it worse. Yeah, and where does it in this stanza number 5 talk about the casualties? All that was left of them. Doesn't that, so we said earlier, not the 600, and now it says all that was left of them. Doesn't that make it sound like there are not many left? All right, that's number 5. And number 6. So number 5 is really the end of the narration. It's a narrative poem. You know, it starts and there's an event that takes place. So number 6 is more of an epilogue or you know, comment on it. So what was the purpose of the poem, and how does how do you think, how successful do you think the poet was? What is the purpose of the poem?
Is it for honoring the 600?
That's right. How successful is it?
I think it's pretty successful.
Have you ever heard of this before? Today?
No.
So what? 1854. So 100 and almost 170 years after this took place, 3 17-year-old students in Greensboro, North Carolina know about it. You walked into here, you had no idea this ever happened. Here, when you walk out of here in a few minutes, you have learned that it happened.
Never forget.
Well, you might forget, but for these few minutes that he honored those 600 for these few minutes that we talked about. They've been dead 150 years, 170 years, and he honored them. And what makes this really interesting to me is the very fact that I said in this very part of the world, this is happening right now in Ukraine. Same nationality, except the British aren't involved. By the way, you know what a Cossack is? Those were people that lived in and around Russia. They were always they were a nomadic people for a long time. So they're kind of an ethnic minority, if you want to call it that, of Russia. But they were always a part of Russia in a way, even though ethnically they're not. You know, Russia spans 2 continents. You know, like when you think of a Russian, what do you think of? Like you have a picture in your mind of a Russian. What does he look like?
I think of Julia Crenshaw.
Wow.
She's Russian.
Is she really? Why didn't I know that? Is she adopted? Or is she from Ukraine? Was it Ukraine?
I think it's from Russia.
I never knew that, because I know some other students who have been. I know, now she's the 3rd student, well, at least 2 of them were Ukrainian, and she is not. I didn't know that. Wow, I wonder what she thinks about all that. Does she have, I mean, you know, she probably has no connection with Russia anymore, does she? I'm glad you said that. I just saw her. Well, that's interesting. Well, I guess I'll think about it. But that's not the only picture of Russia. The Russians are Asian as well. They're Asian Russians. Did you know that Russia goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean? And it's right above China? They actually fought a war with Japan one time, about the same time period. The Russians and the Japanese were fighting. So there's a lot of ethnic groups in Russia. It's very diverse. I don't think the Ukrainians are particularly, I don't think they look any different from the Russians. You know? Like the American Civil War, it's hard to shoot people that look just like you, you know, that you might even be related to them. In any civil war like that, you're killing people that could be related to you. Well, we didn't get to the second part of this, but we did. This is a perfect example of Tennyson. He writes for the country. He was a poet laureate. So the entire country, he takes a moment and he puts in writing what everybody's thinking. You know, he puts in writing what everybody's talking about. And so he did that. And so tomorrow, we won't be able to do it tomorrow. But we will, we'll talk about the book, and you at least, Sierra, is gonna connect the Red Badger Courage to life. Not just life, but our life and your
Our
life.
life.
I'm very interested. I wouldn't miss tomorrow if it was the end of the world. I would be here to hear that. I always wanna, anytime I say that, I always wanna say, Lord, it may be that you don't want me here, but if I have anything to do with it, I'm gonna be here to hear about that. All right, good. 11? I mean, it's just a little thing.
It's okay, I need all the grades I can get.
Sure. Would you like to make this into like a test grade for Latin? I could just transfer this
Yes,
to Latin.
that would be great. If you could just talk to Ms. Zeller about that.